Joining me now, the Sun's travel editor, Lisa Monet. Lisa, so thank you so much for joining us. This is going on and on interminably, isn't it? Is there anything
yes.
new to report, or is it simply that it's never resolved, so it never moves on?
Very much that. I mean, we're actually entering the third calendar year of these strikes, and there seems to be no progress at all. The last time that the unions were given a pay offer was back in April 2023. That has not been given to the members. The leadership basically said, no, this is not good enough. The 5% pay rise that the government and the train companies are offering comes conditions on working changes changing, or changes into working practices, and that's just a complete red line for the union. So it has not been put to the members. The members, though, have said that they have mandated for strikes, and they are continuing to mandate for strikes. They're voting to strike. And as you say, it is the British travelling public that at the moment is on the sharp end of trying to deal with this, because there's complete impasse.
The news today, though, Lisa, seems to be that lots of people did travel on the railways anyway. There were various minimum services running. Apparently Waterloo station was pretty busy this morning. There's a certain amount of traffic going on the railways still today, isn't there?
That's right, yes. I mean, most of the train companies have cancelled thousands of trains, yes, but there are some minimum services running. Thameslink, which is one of the ones out on strike today, that's my train line. There is just basically a one sort of shuttle that's going between St Pancras and Luton, and that's it. Now, this is a line that stretches from Bedford down to Brighton. So although there are some trains running, it is very few, and it's really only people that absolutely have to use those services that will be attempting to travel today.
If people watching are thinking, why hasn't the government done something to stop this or move it along, or, bring about some form of mediation to reach some kind of conclusion? Is there any explanation about why there's been such a stalemate on this and nobody's managed to, to take the leadership or have the initiative or I don't know what, the smarts, let's say, just to shove it along a bit and get it to be sorted out?
I think it's purely because we've got two such different positions here. The government are saying that post-pandemic, the way that the railways are used is very different to the way it was beforehand, and that there has to be changes to working practices to make the railways fit for modern society and the way that we want to use them going forward. They say, the government, that obviously, the taxpayer is supporting the railways by up to £54 million a week at the moment, because they're not paying their way, according to the government. They're saying that's why this pay rise of 5% is all they can offer, and it does come with those strings attached in terms of changes to working practices. That is a red line for the railways, the unions, and that's why we're at this state. Now, obviously, there was a new bill put to law just this year, basically introducing the option that train companies could have a minimum service level. So 40% of trains would have to run at any time during a strike. None of the train companies have used that. The only one that tried to was LNER, and Aslef immediately called not just one day of strikes, but 5 days of strikes across the LNER network. At that point, LNER came back and said, OK, we won't introduce the minimum levels of service. And at that point, Aslef took it back down to 1 day. And it's also an issue, I think, as well, is that these train operating companies don't want to introduce this minimum service level, even though it's now there and under the law. As you say, Rishi Sunak, very, very frustrated that we're not using it, because they've still got to have that good working relationship with their employees going forward. All we can hope is that at some point, maybe this government or perhaps a Labour government, if it's coming next, will be able to come to some kind of better understanding as to how we're going to resolve this dispute.
And how important do you think, Lisa, public opinion is in a matter like this? We know that broadly speaking, the public is very much behind striking nurses, striking junior hospital doctors. There are various strikes that kind of catch the public imagination. The public is prepared to think, well, this is very difficult for me and most inconvenient, but I completely get it, I understand it. Is the same true of this particular strike, or does the public continue to think, at least many members of the public, that actually, lots of rail workers are well remunerated and, their rights are pretty well consolidated, and, that there's a less of a well of support for this strike?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's good to point out here that this 5% pay rise they're being offered will take train drivers up to an average of 65,000. That's for a 4-day week, 35-hour day, and that's without their overtime. And as we've seen during this week-long strike period, there is an overtime ban as well, and that has had a huge impact on the number of trains running. At the moment, train operating companies don't employ enough drivers to actually run the full schedule unless those drivers are doing overtime. And I think that's where the government feels that there needs to be a change in the way that working practices running across the railways are. Yes, I think there is sympathy for maybe the likes of the RMT workers. Someone who's cleaning a train earning the minimum wage, I think is going to have sympathy that they should get maybe a pay rise that's in line with inflation or maybe a little bit above inflation. Whether or not there is that same sympathy for a train driver earning £65,000 a year, it's difficult to say, but I think it is something that I feel we almost seem to have become used to these train strikes and we're just working our way around them, and that's not good for the railways in general. If the railways are going to be that unpredictable, people will just come up with alternative ways of travelling.
And as far as predictions for travel for the rest of the week are concerned, we know that the north is really going to get it in the neck tomorrow, don't we?
That's right. And then it will be the intercity services on Friday and Saturday that will be most impacted by this. So anyone looking to do those long leisure journeys that you would perhaps be visiting friends, family, or going out on a trip to the likes of, Glasgow, Scotland, Edinburgh, Manchester, Leeds, those are the kind of services that are going to be impacted. And again, we've got this overtime ban that's going to lead to a reduction in services as well. So this is really quite a clever idea by Aslef, because train services are going to be impacted throughout quite a long period, and people are going to have to be very careful if they're looking to use the railways to check before they set off to make sure that their trains are actually running. Any trains that do run are going to be extremely busy, and obviously either side of that day of strike action you are going to see services finishing much earlier and then starting up much later the day afterwards. So it's going to have an impact across this whole week.
Lisa, thank you very much indeed.